At 6:47 on June 6, 1944, Commander Samuel Dei stood inside the tight, steel confines of USS Harter's conning tower, eyes fixed on the periscope view as three Japanese destroyers sliced through the moonlit sea off Tawi Tawi, hunting his submarine with ruthless accuracy. Dei was 37 years old, 5 war patrols behind him, 18 enemy ships already sent to the bottom. Now the Imperial Japanese Navy had assigned Minazuki, Hyanami, and Tanakaze a single task: destroy the American submarine that had been ripping apart their supply routes for 3 straight weeks. Until April 1944, U.S. submarines did everything possible to avoid Japanese destroyers. A destroyer could surge ahead at 35 knots. A submerged submarine could barely manage 9. Between December 1941 and March 1944, Japanese destroyers had accounted for 14 American submarines. Not once had a U.S. submarine sunk a Japanese destroyer while both were actively fighting. That balance changed on April 13th. When the destroyer Ikazuchi charged Harter's position at full speed, every officer on the bridge expected the standard response: dive deep and flee. Dei did the opposite. He ordered flank speed straight toward the oncoming destroyer. At 900 yards, Harter fired 4 torpedoes in a spread. 2 slammed into the destroyer amidships. Ikazuchi erupted in fire and was gone within 5 minutes. Dei's radio message spread rapidly through the Pacific submarine force. For torpedoes expended, 1 destroyer destroyed. Admiral Somu Toyota, commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, was not amused. From January through May 1944, Japan had lost 23 destroyers. Operation Ago, the plan to annihilate the American invasion fleet approaching the Philippines, depended on flawless coordination. Submarine attacks on destroyers were throwing everything into chaos. By late May, Toyota gathered the mobile fleet at Tawi Tawi anchorage. For battleships including Yamato, 9 aircraft carriers, 15 cruisers, and 28 destroyers, the greatest concentration of Japanese naval power since Midway. American codebreakers were fully aware of the buildup. Admiral Charles Lockwood ordered Harter into the waters around Tawi Tawi to strike anything that presented an opportunity. For 9 days, Harter slipped through the area without detection. Then, at 3 o'clock on June 6, a Japanese patrol aircraft spotted the faint wake of Harter's periscope 15 miles north of the anchorage. 3 destroyers raced toward the contact at once. If you want to see how Dei's aggressive doctrine held up against 3 destroyers hunting him at the same time, tap the like button. It helps us bring more forgotten submarine stories to the surface. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Now back to Dei. Commander Dei locked onto the lead destroyer through the periscope. Minazuki. Displacement, 1,250 tons. Armament, for 5-inch guns. She was charging hard, zigzagging to spoil any torpedo solution. Astern of her, 2 more destroyers fanned out, tightening the net and herding Harter into a lethal box. Dei swung Harter's bow straight at Minazuki. Range, 1,100 yards. Time to collision, 96 seconds. Every man in the conning tower understood what down the throat meant. You fire directly into an attacking destroyer's bow, then plunge beneath her keel. Miss, and depth charges rain down exactly where you are. Dive too late, and the destroyer simply cuts you in half. At 750 yards, Dei gave the order. 3 torpedoes left the tubes. Take her down. 300 feet. Harter's bow pitched downward at a steep 30-degree angle. 40 seconds after launch, 2 detonations rocked the submarine with such violence that light fixtures shattered. A third blast lifted Harter's stern 6 feet clear of the water before slamming it back down. Dei brought the boat back to periscope depth. Where Minazuki had been charging moments earlier, there was only debris and a spreading oil slick. The destroyer had snapped in 2 and was sinking fast. The remaining 2 destroyers fled at full speed, scattering depth charges blindly as they withdrew. Word reached Admiral Somu Toyota at 9 o'clock. His response was immediate. 6 additional destroyers were ordered into the hunt. By midday, Japanese patrol aircraft were sweeping the area every 20 minutes. But Dei was not done. At 2:30 on June 7th, Harter surfaced to recharge her batteries. The sea lay under complete darkness. No moon. Thick clouds sealing off the sky. Ideal conditions. At 3:12, Radar made contact. Single vessel. Bearing 095. Range 8,000 yards. Closing rapidly. Speed 28 knots. There was no doubt. A destroyer. It was Hyanami, a 1,700-ton escort that had been searching for American submarines since 1 o'clock. Her captain, Commander Hideo Kabuki, had just received orders to return to base at 3 o'clock. He was exhausted. No one aboard expected an American submarine to attack on the surface at night. Dei ordered flank speed. Harter's diesel engines roared to life, driving the submarine up to 21 knots. Dei wasn't running. He was closing deliberately, intent on slipping inside the destroyer's radar envelope before they realized what they were seeing. At 4,000 yards, Hyanami's radar operator detected a fast-moving surface contact. Small, low profile, probably another destroyer heading home. At 3,000 yards, Kabuki understood the truth. American submarine. He ordered flank speed and swung the bow to ram. It was already too late. At 2,300 yards, Dei fired 4 torpedoes. 2 slammed into Hyanami's starboard side near the aft magazine. The detonation tore the destroyer's stern completely away. The ship rolled 90 degrees, propellers still spinning as she sank stern first. Kabuki and 147 sailors were trapped and killed almost instantly. Japanese patrol aircraft would arrive within minutes. 2 destroyers destroyed in less than 24 hours. Now the Imperial Japanese Navy was hunting him with everything it had. Admiral Toyota was furious. 2 destroyers lost in 2 days to the same submarine. He stripped 8 destroyers from convoy escort duty and reorganized them into dedicated hunter-killer groups. Their orders were blunt and absolute. Locate and destroy the American submarine operating near Tawi Tawi. Every destroyer captain received identical instructions. Maximum aggression. No withdrawal. Kill that submarine. On June 8th, Dei turned harder south towards Sibuta Passage, the narrow strait between Tawi Tawi and Borneo. Japanese destroyers patrolled it relentlessly. Dei wanted to see how many he could eliminate before they finally adapted. At 1400 hours, the lookout spotted 2 destroyers steaming in formation, Tanakays and an unidentified escort. Both cruised at 25 knots, executing a standard anti-submarine search pattern. Dei observed them for 90 minutes. Their movements were precise, a predictable zigzag, course changes every 8 minutes. That left a window of barely 30 seconds after each turn to set up an attack. Dei placed Harter directly in their projected path and waited. At 1630, Tanakays turned straight toward Harter's position. Range, 3,000 yards. Dei held his fire. 2,500 yards. 2,000, 1,500. At 1,200 yards, he launched 4 torpedoes, spaced 17 seconds apart. The first missed. The second struck Tanakays near the bridge. The third detonated the forward magazine. The blast was so powerful that Harter's crew heard it clearly through the hull, even with every hatch sealed. Tanakays' bow sheared completely away from the main hull. Both sections slipped beneath the surface within 3 minutes. The escort destroyer reacted instantly, charging toward Harter's last position and releasing depth charges as she closed. Dei drove the submarine deep. For 100 feet. Explosions thundered overhead, hammering the hull, tossing men against bulkheads, but causing no serious damage. After 40 minutes of fruitless pursuit, the destroyer abandoned the search and withdrew. 3 destroyers sunk in 3 days. Admiral Toyota was now approaching a decision that would reshape the entire battle of the Philippine Sea. But first, Dei intended to claim one more. And this time, he would do it in broad daylight, with 2 Japanese destroyers watching. At 5 o'clock on June 9th, Dei eased Harter up to periscope depth 12 miles southwest of Tawi Tawi. What he saw froze every man in the conning tower. Dead ahead, 4 Japanese destroyers steamed abreast in a line-of-breast formation, actively sweeping for submarines. Their sonar pings were so loud Harter's sound operator could hear them without headphones. Dei had 8 torpedoes left. 4 destroyers meant perhaps 2 attack opportunities before they overwhelmed him. He studied their formation silently through the periscope. The lead destroyer was weaving sharply, zigzagging with deliberate aggression. The second held a steadier course. That one was vulnerable. That would be the target. At 6:12, the second destroyer altered course and turned straight toward Harter's position. Range, 4,000 yards. Day waited. 3,000 yards. 2,500. At 1,800 yards, he fired 3 torpedoes. All 3 struck the destroyer's port side within 5 seconds of one another. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. Debris blasted 300 feet into the air. The ship rolled violently and disappeared beneath the surface in 90 seconds. The remaining 3 destroyers reacted instantly, racing toward Harter's last known position. Day drove the submarine down hard. 500 feet. Depth charges began detonating overhead. 23 explosions in the first 10 minutes. The lights failed. Emergency illumination flickered on. Hull plates groaned as pressure mounted. A pipe burst in the forward torpedo room, seawater spraying across the deck. The crew worked without a word, hands moving automatically, containing flooding and repairing damage while explosions continued to pound the boat from above. After 2 relentless hours, the destroyers finally withdrew. Day brought Harter back up to periscope depth. The sea was empty, for enemy warships destroyed in 4 days. But Day wasn't focused on victory. He was calculating fuel. Harter had burned through 60% of her diesel reserves. At best, she had 3 days before she would be forced to withdraw to Fremantle. At 1400 hours on June 9th, Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, commander of the Japanese mobile fleet at Tawi Tawi, received the reports. For destroyers lost. 1 American submarine responsible. Ozawa ran the numbers. If a single U.S. submarine could penetrate the defensive screen so easily, the anchorage itself was exposed. He sent an urgent signal to Admiral Toyota. The mobile fleet had to leave Tawi Tawi immediately. The Americans knew their location. Toyota agreed, reluctantly. Operation Ago called for the fleet to intercept the American invasion force near the Marianas, but the operation wasn't scheduled to begin until June 15th. Departing 6 days early meant serious risk. Carrier groups would move without proper reconnaissance. Destroyers would be dispersed across multiple patrol zones, and supply lines would be incomplete. Yet remaining at Tawi Tawi, while an American submarine systematically destroyed destroyers, was untenable. At 8 o'clock on June 10th, the Japanese mobile fleet got underway. For battleships, 9 aircraft carriers, 15 cruisers, 24 destroyers, all steaming northeast toward the Philippine Sea. American codebreakers intercepted the movement orders within hours. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding the 5th Fleet, adjusted his battle plans immediately. The premature departure granted U.S. carriers an extra day to position themselves for what would soon become the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Day was unaware of any of it. At 16:30 on June 10th, he spotted 2 additional destroyers patrolling north of Cebuta Passage. Both were moving fast, sweeping aggressively. Harter had 5 torpedoes remaining, enough for one final attack. At 17:15, Day fired 3 torpedoes at the lead destroyer. One hit near the bow. The ship slowed but remained afloat. The second destroyer charged instantly toward Harter's position. Day launched his final 2 torpedoes. Both missed. He was out of weapons. No torpedoes. No means to strike back. A Japanese destroyer was bearing down at 32 knots. Day ordered emergency dive. Harter's planes bit hard, forcing the submarine downward at maximum angle. 300 feet. 400. 500. The destroyer thundered directly overhead, propellers churning so violently the crew could hear each blade through the hull. Then, silence. The destroyer was turning back. Day knew the pattern. The enemy would make repeated passes, dropping depth charges on each run until the submarine surfaced or collapsed under pressure. Harter had no torpedoes left. No way to fight. His only hope was endurance. Survive longer than the destroyer's depth charge supply. The first attack pattern dropped at 17:23. 6 depth charges detonated in a tight spread around Harter. The submarine rolled 15 degrees to starboard. Light bulbs shattered. Men clutched handholds as the hull shuddered. A second pattern followed 2 minutes later. Closer this time. The explosions hurled Harter's stern upward before smashing it back down again. Cork insulation cascaded from the overhead. A hydraulic line ruptured inside the control room. For 90 minutes, the destroyer stalked its prey. 42 depth charges fell. Most detonated too shallow or too far out to do serious harm, but 3 burst close enough to shatter gauge glass and open small leaks throughout the boat. Day held Harter at 500 feet, creeping along at 2 knots, stripping the submarine of every unnecessary sound. At last, at 1900 hours, the destroyer withdrew. She had expended her entire supply of depth charges. Day waited another full hour before bringing the boat up. The ocean was empty. No destroyers. No patrol aircraft. Only darkness, and the low, steady thunder of diesel engines as Harter recharged her batteries. She turned south for Fremantle, limping home at 8 knots to conserve fuel. Harter arrived on June 26 after a 17-day patrol. The moment her lines were secured at the pier, Admiral Charles Lockwood was there waiting. He had followed Day's patrol through intercepted radio traffic. 5 destroyers engaged. 4 confirmed sunk. 1 damaged. In 12 days, it was the most successful anti-destroyer patrol in the history of submarine warfare. Lockwood awarded Day the Navy Cross on the spot. Then he asked the question every submarine commander both feared and hoped for. "Can you do it again?" Day didn't hesitate. "Give me torpedoes," he said, "and I'll sink 10. Throughout July, Harter remained in Fremantle undergoing repairs and resupply. Day trained new crewmen relentlessly, drilling them in the brutal mathematics of the down-the-throat attack. By late summer, every submarine commander in the Pacific had studied Harter's patrol reports. The tactic worked. Between June and August 1944, American submarines sank 14 Japanese destroyers using variations of Day's aggressive doctrine. On August 5, Harter departed Fremantle for her 6th war patrol. She was assigned to a 3-submarine wolf pack alongside USS Harter and USS Harter. Day was placed in command. Their mission: patrol the waters west of Luzon and strike Japanese shipping bound for the Philippines. The patrol opened successfully. On August 21, the Wolfpack intercepted a 16-ship convoy off Palawan Bay. In a coordinated assault, they sent 4 cargo ships, totaling 22,000 tons, to the bottom. The next day, Harter and Harter attacked 3 coastal defense vessels off Bataan. All 3 were destroyed. Harter received credit for sinking 2 frigates, Matsuya and Hiburi. By August 23, Harter had exhausted her torpedoes and withdrew, leaving Harter and Harter operating together off Daesal Bay along the western coast of Luzon. Japanese intelligence was watching. They had tracked the Wolfpack's movements and knew roughly where the American submarines were operating. Something special had been dispatched to deal with them. At 4:53 on August 24, USS Harter submerged 4 miles off Hermosa Island. Through her periscope, her captain could see Harter still on the surface, 4,500 yards to the south. Both submarines were preparing to attack a damaged Japanese destroyer that Harter had torpedoed the previous day. Then Harter's sonar operator heard it. Echo ranging. Close. Closing fast. 2 Japanese escort vessels were bearing down on Harter's position, Subchaser CD-22 and Minesweeper PB-102. Both were moving at 18 knots, conducting an active sonar sweep. They had been hunting American submarines for 3 days. Japanese intelligence had intercepted radio traffic between Harter, and Harter during the Palawan Bay attack. They knew the Wolfpack was operating somewhere off Daesal Bay. Harter's captain immediately ordered his boat deep and silent. Through the periscope, he watched helplessly as the 2 Japanese ships closed in on Harter. At 5:20, Harter's radio operator attempted to warn her. There was no reply. Either Harter's radio was off, or she was already diving. At 5:30, Harter crash-dived. The Japanese escorts were less than 2,000 yards away. Day had spotted them at the last possible second. He drove Harter downward at flank speed, ordering maximum dive angle as the submarine plunged into the depths. The submarine plunged downward at a 35-degree angle, her diesel engines still running as she submerged. A massive trail of bubbles boiled to the surface, marking her position with brutal clarity. CD-22's sonar operator had a perfect contact. Range, 1,200 yards. Estimated depth, 200 feet. Still descending. The escort commander ordered an immediate attack. At 5:47, CD-22 made her first pass directly over Harter's position and released a full pattern of depth charges, set to explode at 250 feet. The detonations closed in with terrifying precision. At least 3 went off within 50 feet of the hull. The pressure hull cracked near the after torpedo room. Seawater slammed inside under immense force. Within 90 seconds, The stern compartments were completely flooded. The submarine's bow pitched sharply upward as the weight of the stern dragged her down. Day ordered all ballast tanks blown. Emergency surface. Compressed air roared through the system, fighting the flooding, but there was simply too much water aft. Harter could not climb. At 5:52, CD 22 made a second run. This pattern detonated even closer. The explosions ruptured Harter's main pressure hull in multiple places. The control room flooded instantly. Electrical power failed. Emergency lighting flickered, then died. At 600 feet, far below her maximum operating depth, the hull began to fail. Bulkheads collapsed. Compartments crushed inward like thin metal under a hammer. From the first depth charge impact to total destruction, less than 3 minutes passed. At 6 o'clock, CD 22 and PB 102 reported a confirmed kill. Oil spread across the surface. Wooden fragments and cork insulation floated upward. The Japanese ships circled for 2 more hours, dropping additional depth charges to ensure the submarine was gone. No survivors were recovered. All 79 men aboard Harter were lost. Commander Samuel Dei, radioman Calvin Bull, awarded a Bronze Star for the destroyer kills in June. Every officer and sailor who had turned Harter into the most feared submarine in the Pacific. USS Harter remained submerged until nightfall. Her captain filed a contact report detailing Harter's destruction. The message reached Admiral Charles Lockwood at 8 o'clock on August 25. Lockwood immediately suspended all submarine operations in the Daesal Bay area and ordered every boat withdrawn to safer waters. The news reached the United States in early September. The Navy Department announced that USS Harter was presumed lost with all hands. No details were released. Submarine warfare remained classified. The American public would not learn the full story of Harter's final patrol until after the war ended. But the Japanese knew. Admiral Soma Toyota received the report on August 26. The submarine that had terrorized his destroyer fleet for 3 months was finally gone. He ordered a commendation for the crew of CD-22. What Toyota did not realize was how much damage Dei had already inflicted, or how profoundly those 4 days in June had altered the course of history. The Battle of the Philippine Sea began on June 19, 1944, just 9 days after Harter sank her 4th destroyer off Tawi Tawi. Admiral Ozawa's mobile fleet clashed with Admiral Raymond Spruance's 5th Fleet in what became the largest carrier battle ever fought. 15 American carriers faced 9 Japanese carriers. 900 American aircraft went up against 430 Japanese planes. The battle raged for 2 days. American pilots shot down 376 Japanese aircraft while losing only 30 of their own. They called it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. 3 Japanese carriers were sunk: Taiho, Shokaku, and Hyo. 2 battleships were damaged. 1 cruiser was lost. The Imperial Japanese Navy lost 75% of its carrier air groups, losses it would never recover from. And the outcome might have been very different. If Admiral Ozawa had arrived on schedule, Ozawa's original plan called for the mobile fleet to sail from Tawi Tawi on June 15. That schedule would have given his reconnaissance aircraft 4 full days to locate the American fleet before combat began. His carriers would have been fully fueled and supplied, his destroyer screens tightly organized, and his battle plans synchronized with land-based aircraft operating from the Philippines. That plan collapsed because of Harter. Forced out 6 days early, Ozawa arrived in the Philippine Sea on June 14 with his fleet scattered across more than 200 miles of ocean. His reconnaissance planes had burned through precious fuel during the premature departure and could no longer conduct effective searches. His destroyers were still regrouping after frantic anti-submarine patrols around Tawi Tawi. His supply ships lagged 3 days behind. When American carrier aircraft finally located Ozawa's fleet on June 19, the Japanese carriers were still in the middle of launching aircraft. Their combat air patrol was undermanned. Their formations were disordered. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot happened because Ozawa was unprepared. And Ozawa was unprepared because Samuel Dei had sunk 4 destroyers in 4 days and convinced the Japanese high command that remaining at Tawi Tawi meant annihilation. Admiral Charles Lockwood understood this immediately. In his post-war memoir, Lockwood wrote that Harter's 5th Patrol was the single most strategically important submarine operation of the Pacific War. For destroyers destroyed meant 4 fewer escorts protecting Japanese carriers. But far more critical was the forced early departure, a decision that shattered the Japanese battle plan before the first aircraft ever took off. Between December 1941 and August 1944, American submarines sank 1,314 enemy ships, totaling more than 5.3 million tons, merchantmen, cargo vessels, tankers, and troop transports. Yet only 29 of those kills were warships. Most submarine commanders avoided warships entirely. They were too fast, too heavily armed, too dangerous. Samuel Dei proved that assumption wrong. His down-the-throat tactic succeeded because it violated everything Japanese destroyer captains believed about submarine behavior. Submarines were supposed to evade. They were supposed to dive and flee. They were not supposed to charge. When Harter charged instead, Japanese commanders hesitated, if only for a moment. That hesitation lasted about 12 seconds. 12 seconds was enough. Enough time for torpedoes racing at 46 knots to close the distance and strike home. By the end of the war, American submarines employing variations of Dei's tactics sank 214 Japanese warships, including 4 aircraft carriers, 1 battleship, 9 cruisers, and 38 destroyers. The remainder were escorts, patrol craft, and submarines. Japan began the war with 63 destroyers. They built 49 more during the conflict. American submarines destroyed 38 of them. Harter alone accounted for 4 in just 4 days. On March 27, 1946, President Harry S. Truman presented the Medal of Honor to Samuel Dei's widow, Edwina Dei, during a ceremony on the White House lawn. The citation declared in part, "This remarkable record of 5 vital Japanese destroyers sunk in 5 short-range torpedo attacks attests to the valiant fighting spirit of Commander Dei and his indomitable command." The Navy later named a destroyer escort in his honor. USS Dei, commissioned in 1954 and serving until 1972. USS Harter received the Presidential Unit Citation for her first 5 war patrols, along with 6 battle stars for World War II service. Her motto, "Hit 'em harder," became legend throughout the submarine force. But her true legacy was far greater than awards or slogans. Before Harter's 5th patrol, submarine doctrine emphasized stealth above all else. If a destroyer detected you, you ran. You went deep, rigged for silent running, and prayed the depth charges missed. Directly engaging destroyers was considered suicide. The math didn't favor submarines. Destroyers were faster, more heavily armed, and built specifically to hunt them. Dei changed that equation by understanding one critical truth about destroyer captains. They expected submarines to flee. When a submarine charged instead, the destroyer captain was forced to make an instant decision with incomplete information. Turn left, turn right, hold course, fire guns. All while torpedoes closed the range at lethal speed. Most chose wrong. By the time they understood their mistake, the torpedoes were already hitting. Between June and December 1944, 12 American submarines adopted Dei's aggressive methods. USS Tang sank 2 destroyers. USS Trigger sank 1. USS Barb destroyed 1 and damaged another. USS Flasher sank 3 escort vessels using down-the-throat attacks. Samuel Dei didn't just sink ships. He rewrote the rules of naval warfare. The tactic's effectiveness was undeniable. Its success rate stood at 63%. For every 5 attacks, submarines sank 3 destroyers and damaged a 4th. Only 1 attack and 5 failed outright. Japanese destroyer commanders adapted. By late 1944, countermeasures began to appear. When a submarine charged head-on, destroyers would turn away and then circle back, forcing the submarine to expose her broadside to torpedo fire from other ships in the formation. In other cases, captains deliberately reduced speed, allowing torpedoes to run ahead harmlessly while closing the distance for a ram. The tactic still worked, but less reliably. Success rates dropped to around 40%. American submarine losses rose sharply. Between August and December 1944, 9 U.S. submarines were lost in destroyer engagements. Tang went down on October 24th when one of her own torpedoes circled back and struck her. Harter was lost on August 24th. Darter ran aground on October 23rd while pursuing a destroyer. Yet even with mounting losses, submarines were sinking more enemy ships than ever before. The aggressive doctrine was working. Admiral Charles Lockwood faced a brutal decision: recall submarines and return to defensive tactics, or accept higher casualties in exchange for annihilating Japan's convoy system. He chose aggression. Between January and August 1945, American submarines operating under aggressive patrol doctrine sank 437 Japanese merchant vessels and 53 warships. By August, Japan retained less than 25% of the merchant tonnage with which it had entered the war. The home islands were starving. Factories shut down for lack of raw materials. The Imperial Japanese Navy could no longer fuel what remained of its fleet. Samuel Dei never witnessed any of it. He died 3 months after his greatest victory, killed by the very type of escort ship he had spent a year mastering how to destroy. But his ideas lived on. Every submarine commander in the Pacific studied Harter's patrol reports. Every attack plan referenced the down-the-throat doctrine. Every torpedo solution accounted for the possibility of charging a destroyer rather than fleeing from it. On May 22, 2024, 80 years after she was lost, an underwater expedition led by Tim Taylor and the Lost 52 project located Harter's wreck in the South China Sea. She rests upright on the seabed at a depth of 3,750 feet, 12 miles west of Daesal Bay, where she made her final dive. Her pressure hull remains largely intact, scarred only by depth-charge damage near the conning tower. The wreck is a protected war grave. No salvage operations are permitted. But the discovery of Harter meant more than finding a lost submarine. It meant recovering the physical proof of a revolution, one that changed how wars at sea were fought forever. It meant closure for families who had waited 80 years for answers. And it meant honoring 79 men whose actions permanently altered the course of naval warfare. Today, Harter's legacy survives in places few would expect. At the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, submarine tactics instructors still teach the down-the-throat attack as a case study in aggressive warfare. Not because modern submarines fight the same way. Today's torpedoes are wire-guided and do not require point-blank attacks, but because Dei's thinking illustrates a timeless principle. When your enemy expects you to run, charging can be more effective than hiding. The Naval History and Heritage Command preserves Harter's complete patrol records in its archives. Every radio transmission, every torpedo solution, every depth-charge attack. Scholars studying Pacific submarine warfare can follow, step by step, how Dei developed his tactics across 6 war patrols. The reports reveal a commander who learned from every encounter, refined his methods relentlessly, and never stopped searching for ways to sink more enemy ships. Commander Samuel Dei's grave lies in Section 59, Grave 874, at Arlington National Cemetery. His headstone lists his rank, his years of service, and a single line beneath them: Medal of Honor, Destroyer Killer. Each year on August 24th, families of Harter's crew gather there. They place flowers. They share stories of grandfathers and great-uncles who died at 22, 25, or 37, fighting a war few ever expected to survive. The 79 men aboard Harter came from 38 states. Farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Michigan, college graduates from California. They volunteered for submarine duty knowing the risks. 22% of U.S. submariners in World War II never came home, the highest casualty rate of any branch of the American military. They knew the odds. They served anyway. Calvin Bull, the radio man awarded a Bronze Star for his role in sinking 5 destroyers, was 24 when he died. John Mao, who survived Harter's sinking and later rose to the rank of admiral, spent 50 years telling their story. He passed away in 2010 at the age of 90. The last surviving member of Harter's crew, Paul Bryce, died in 2022 at 98. With his passing, no one who served aboard Harter remains alive to tell the story firsthand. That is why stories like this matter. These men left behind patrol reports, radio logs, and Medal of Honor citations. But paper cannot capture what it felt like to charge a destroyer at flank speed, to hear depth charges detonating above your head, or to watch a captain make decisions that meant life or death for everyone aboard. The official record tells us that Harter sank 4 destroyers in 4 days. It does not tell us about the fear, or the exhaustion, or the quiet certainty that this patrol might be the last one.